This is all about partners in peace and sharing personal life transformations. We're going to be sharing some information that is completely unknown to the vast, vast majority of the population. And this information, much of it, I came into possession of it back around 1994. I'd already been in the business of coaching business professionals for about 6 or 7 years. By that point, 1994, and I discovered a good bit of this information. And it just shocked me. It blew my mind. And you're going to get the short, compressed version, which I think is like the minimum and sufficient that you need to know to really get how knock your socks off kind of information this is. But it's not just shockingly mind-blowing, it's heartwarming, it's inspiring, it feels really good. We're going to cover some of the existential questions. Why are we here? And what's our job while we're here? In this particular session, we're going to look at the 4 dimensions of consciousness. And these 4 dimensions comprise your team, so to speak. So there's in a sense, there's 4 different conscious systems that make up who you are here on Earth as a human. So, and our task in this lifetime is to learn how to create our lives effectively, and of course do it responsibly at the same time, in the sense that no one is harmed by what we're creating, but learning how to do it effectively. And there's this precision formula for how to create that I call the butterfly code. So for now, the things that I'm going to talk about in just the next few minutes, some of them are going to be quite strange. And so I'm going to suggest that you don't believe anything that comes out over the next few minutes, that you don't believe it as gospel, but you, for a short period of time, just act as if that what you're hearing, what you're seeing, act as if it might be true. And then see where that takes you when you act as if something might be true. See what that feels like when you discover something. So the first thing I want to share with you is what I call the 3 prime directives for the human species and for humans individually. We are here. The first prime directive is to have as wide a range of experiences as you desire inside the realm within which you find yourself. These 3 prime directives, to me, are something that seem self-evident. Like if you look around the world, what are people doing? Well, they're trying to have experiences. They're trying to have all the experiences that they actually desire inside the realm within which they find themselves, like inside what family they find themselves, inside what culture, inside what country they happen to live in. But all of us have this like drive to have experiences, the ones that we desire, as many as we can. And then the second prime directive is to appreciate the aesthetics of life. To, when we create something, when we have like a really great experience, that we're able to look at it and say, wow, that is really cool. And that we appreciate our lives. Now, there are times when we do something that we don't appreciate. And those are learnings for us to then, get back into the swim of things and start doing things that we really want to do, and then continue to appreciate the successes that we have. And the third prime directive is to learn to create your life as you go, more and more effectively and responsibly, that it harms no one. And this is especially true to learn to create your life as you go, because one of the issues that is a challenge is what I call a victim orientation. When I think life is happening to me, when I think people are doing things to me, when I think I'm at the effect of what's going on out in the world, being in victim orientation has its upside in the sense that I can, I don't have to take accountability for my life. I can blame it on other people. But the downside is that I may go through my whole life like that and never learn how to create my life as I go. And so this is one of the prime directives, to learn that you can absolutely create your life. And in the end, I'm going to recommend that to discover and fulfill the greatest manifestation of your mission, purpose, and destiny is a grand desire, is a grand journey to be on. So how do you create effectively? There's a certain framework of thinking that it has multiple aspects to it for how to create effectively. And the first one in the framework of thinking about creating effectively is to make decisions. Entertain your intentions, but make decisions. So often we find, well, back in my days when I was working with business professionals, the ones that were the most successful actually did that. They made decisions in their lives and they made things happen. So making decisions is like step number one, primo. Then acknowledging your limitations when you are making these decisions, like having this thought, acting as if, I don't know how I'm going to pull this off, but I'm pretty determined. I want this to happen, and I'm going to do what I have to make this happen. The third thing is to select a step, just one single step, or maybe one or two steps that get you going. This is all part of creating effectively. The fourth is to do that first step. And then this is something that is a challenge for people. I'm going to make a case for it more so than I'm going to make right here, right now. But I'm just going to lay it out there that as your next step, once you make a decision, you select the first step, you entrust and surrender the manifestation and the unfolding of it. You surrender it to life, or you surrender it to the universe, or you surrender it to God. Or I'm going to talk about something in a few minutes called the profound self, which is an aspect of yourself, your spiritual self. You're going to entrust and surrender the unfolding of the details of your decision to your profound self, your spiritual self. And then the step 5 is to be open and ready to improvise when things start to happen from your first step. Be open and ready to interact with that unfolding, and then be on the lookout, be on the hunt for clues and serendipitous events and help and unexpected resources, and be on the lookout for miracles even that support your decision. And then entrust the grand orchestration of it all, and be open to receiving information, ideas, insights, and impulses for you to act on those clues and respond to those events and graciously accept helps and deeply appreciate those miracles. This is just the fundamental 7-step framework of creating your life effectively. And this is just the beginning of it. So you're going to get these slides. We're going to do much more with it as we go along. Now, let's talk about what are the assets you have to work with in terms of this whole business of creating. Who's your team? So I'm going to show you some videos. They're all really short, but I've compressed all this information to discover what are the 4-dimensional aspects of who you are. So these first 3 short videos talk about the independence of the left and right hemisphere of the brain, and how the left and right hemisphere of the brain can get into conflict with each other. And this is that mind-blowing information that I discovered back in 1994. So here's someone you may have seen before. Her name is Jill Bolte Taylor. She's a neuroscientist and a neuroanatomist. She had a stroke back in 1996, and strange things happened to her when she had her stroke.
I grew up to study the brain because I have a brother who has been diagnosed with a brain disorder, schizophrenia. But on the morning of December 10, 1996, I woke up to discover that I had a brain disorder of my own. A blood vessel exploded in the left half of my brain. And in the course of 4 hours, I watched my brain completely deteriorate in its ability to process all information. If you've ever seen a human brain, it's obvious that the two hemispheres are completely separate from one another. And I have brought for you a real human brain. So this is a real human brain. This is the front of the brain, the back of the brain with the spinal cord hanging down. And this is how it would be positioned inside of my head. And when you look at the brain, it's obvious that the two cerebral cortices are completely separate from one another. The two hemispheres do communicate with one another through the corpus callosum, which is made up of some 300 million axonal fibers. But other than that, the two hemispheres are completely separate. Because they process information differently, each of our hemispheres think about different things, they care about different things, and dare I say, they have very different personalities.
So this is the case that I want you to consider, that each hemisphere of the brain is an independent conscious system. So we're going to do, this is a little bit longer video. It's an American, Scientific American special that was done by Alan Alda, I think it was 1996, in which he interviewed and got a chance to meet Michael Gazzaniga, who is a neuroscientist who was at Caltech back in those days. And Michael Gazzaniga is well known. Well, he should be more well known than he is, but he is known for studying what's called split brain patients. And the video explains a little bit more. This is about 5 minutes worth of this Scientific American special.
We began our journey into the human brain here on the campus of Dartmouth College in New Hampshire. I'd come to meet one of the world's leading brain scientists, Mike Gazzaniga, and a man he's worked with for over a decade. A man with two brains.
You've been working a long time with Dr. Gazzaniga?
14 or 15 years.
It doesn't seem like that long, does it?
The collaboration began when Joe had surgery.
And you had this procedure to correct an epileptic problem,
Yes.
is that right?
Trying to stop the seizures. I was having seizures like every day or so, or sometimes 2 or 3 a day.
To control Joe's epileptic seizures, a surgeon severed the connection between the two halves of his brain. Cutting the corpus callosum like this prevented the spread of the electric storms that caused his seizures. But it also prevented the left and right halves of his brain from communicating with each other. In the years since the operation, Joe's epilepsy has been under control. He now earns a living at an egg farm, and in his everyday life, he's largely unaffected by the fact that his left and his right brains work independently.
Do you feel any different when you think about something than you did, any differently from the way you felt before the procedure?
It's just got a backup brain, that's all.
That's something everybody could use, right?
When Joe is given the same task, his two hands operate as if controlled by two separate brains. What's happening is that each half of Joe's brain is given a separate instruction. He's asked to fix his eyes on the cross in the center of the screen. Anything flashed to the right of the cross goes only to his left hemisphere. Things to the left go to his right hemisphere. Because the two don't communicate, each hand does only what its half of the brain sees.
Wow, look at that. It's really like two different people doing the same.
That's right.
Same task.
That's the idea.
Somebody has given him a secret communication.
That's
and
right.
Now he knows that it's a telephone. Up until then, he was blind. That's really interesting. It's a picture here of somebody communicating almost with another person.
One of the unique things of the human brain is this need to interpret why two events occurred. What was the antecedent of this? What caused this? And if you can imagine that a species like us that has that little chip in its brain that asks those questions is going to survive rather well, because it's going to figure out more about the nature of the world than a species that doesn't have that. The old phrase around our lab is, don't leave home without your left hemisphere. That's where the action is.
And once again, it's just this, it's as if they're two people. No, it's not as if they're two people. They are two people in there. Let's have a look at this. This next one is only 60 seconds, but this blows my mind every time I watch it. The first voice that you'll hear is from a professional narrator. And then the second voice that you hear will be Michael Gazzaniga once again describing what is happening to a split-brain patient in this experiment.
If speech originates in the left half of the brain, are there any functions special to the other half? Here, a split-brain subject provides the answer. As he tries to copy this pattern with blocks, we discover his ability is confined to his right half brain.
Now let's remember that the left hand is governed from the right hemisphere, and you will see that he has absolutely no problem in solving the problem. When the patient tries to solve the problem with his right hand, which is governed from the left hemisphere, we find that he is not capable of doing it. Namely, that the right hand, which is governed from the left hemisphere, is intrinsically incapable of performing this kind of visual constructional tasks. It's interesting to note that the whole perspective is gone. He has 3-in-1 block combinations. It doesn't even square them up. You can see the left hand wants to keep helping the right and is interfering. Well, we've now seen that the left hand can perform the problem and that the right hand cannot. Now the question becomes, what happens when you allow both hands together to try to solve the problem? And what we find out is that they fight over each other. One hand knows how to do it, and one hand does not, and so they more or less squabble. And the reason for this is that the hemispheres are disconnected. The right hemisphere controls the left hand, and the left hemisphere controls the right hand. And these are almost mutually independent systems. It was as if two people were fighting over performing this task. One knew how and one didn't, and one would fight for dominance of the situation.
So you hear that phrase again, it's as if they're two people squabbling. It's no as if, it's really what's happening. This is basically all the research from 1994 encapsulated into just a few minutes' time. It's all you need to know. But we're going to go a little bit deeper. There's also an interesting, this one here is a silent video. There's no sound to it. It's about 45 seconds worth. And this woman is a split brain patient. She's had the corpus callosum cut, the connection between her left and right hemisphere. And I think it's for privacy purposes. She's wearing this, I don't know if you're old enough to remember Zorro or the Lone Ranger. She's wearing, that kind of a mask to protect her identity. Her first name is actually Vicky. And she worked with Gazzaniga and Roger Sperry, who's the other famous neuroscientist. The two of them worked together back in the 60s and early 70s, studying these split brain patients. And in this particular one, she is sitting in front of a computer screen, and it's got a big long name. It's called a tachistoscope. And everything that is flashed, like a picture or a word, to the left side of the screen goes to her right hemisphere. Her right hemisphere can see it, but her left hemisphere can't. Now, everything that goes to the right-hand side of the screen is flashed there, is seen by her left hemisphere, but her right hemisphere doesn't see it. So what's going to happen here is there are going to be three things that are flashed to the left side of the screen, and only her right hemisphere will see it. Now, for 95% of us, our right hemisphere cannot talk. Only our left hemisphere can talk for 95% of us. Now, our right hemisphere, although it can't talk on its own, it does contribute like emotional color to our speech, but it can't speak all by itself. So if somebody, like for example, Jill Bolte Taylor, in her experience, she had a massive stroke in her left hemisphere, which destroyed her temporarily, her ability to speak. She couldn't talk because her right hemisphere was unharmed, but her right hemisphere did not have speech. So now she's going to be flashed pictures to the left side of the screen. They'll only be seen by her right hemisphere, And her right hemisphere can't talk, though. So it can't say what it sees. But she's going to be asked, what does she see? And she's going to give some answers. But the answers can only come from her left hemisphere. Remember, only the left hemisphere can talk. So the first picture that is flashed to the right hemisphere is a spoon. Simple. The second picture that is flashed to her is of a pinup, like a partially nude woman, like those pinups that, back in World War II, the soldiers, kept in their backpacks and, just to remind them of what they're going to be coming home to. So that, and then also the third picture that she gets flashed is also going to be a semi-nude picture of a woman. And I just want you to notice, I'll do some talking as it happens. This is another one that just blows my mind. Okay, she's ready. There's the spoon. Shakes her head. Nope, didn't see a thing. Here comes the next one. There's a picture of a partial nude. Now look at, she says no, she didn't see anything, but she's laughing like she's embarrassed. Her right hemisphere knows, and that her right hemisphere is the one. Here comes it again. Another picture. Once again, shakes her head. Left hemisphere says no, but look at that smile. She sees it. And she's like overcome, just about. Oh my goodness, that's 45 seconds.
Early part of my career. And
yeah, here's Michael Gazzaniga. He's a little bit older here. He's a little bit more wizened and, wise in his years, but he's describing this phenomenon that you just saw acted out by Vicky.
I studied patients who had their two brains disconnected. What we were responsible for was working out the functions of each hemisphere. You could work with them independent of the other influencing it. So you kind of got to study it alone. And over many, many years, the basic finding is, of course, that one brain didn't know what the other one was doing in such people, that the information doesn't transfer between the brains. We found out that in the left brain, there's a special system that seems to always want to explain actions and moods that we have after they occurred. So we would put a question to the right non-speaking hemisphere, and it, in effect, would direct the left hand to do something. And so the patient would do that. And then we would simply say to the patient, well, why did you do that? The patient would make up a story that would explain why their hand had done one thing and why the other hand had done another thing, and wove a tale that made coherent, as it were, the behaviors that are coming from all these separate brain areas. The behavior comes out, and then there's this little narrator up there that turns it into a story that makes us feel coherent and unified. Turns out it's a thing in the left hemisphere that does this. And we called it the interpreter. And it's a very powerful force in the human condition, and it's always trying to figure out and seek explanations for our behavior. And that's what it does.
What you just saw from Michael Gazzaniga and what you saw in the previous short video can be kind of hard to take in at first. So Gazzaniga is talking about this interpreter function that exists only in the left hemisphere, only in the left hemisphere. And this interpreter function in the left hemisphere always is trying to figure things out, always is trying to assess, analyze, come up with judgments about things, always trying to figure things out. Now, in that previous video, you saw Vicky. Her right hemisphere kept seeing these two pictures of the semi-nude woman and kept smiling and chuckling. But her left hemisphere had no clue about seeing anything. The left hemisphere kept saying, nope, didn't see a thing, didn't see a thing, didn't see a thing. So after the second two go-rounds with the semi-nude woman, the experimenters asked her, well, if you didn't see anything, then tell us, why are you laughing? Why are you chuckling? Well, now that question is being asked of the left hemisphere, and the left hemisphere doesn't know. So here comes the interpretive function. So Vicky, this is the part of the story that you never see, but it's in the book, where they ask her, why are you laughing, Vicky? And she kind of just looks confused, and she says, well, it must be your tie, Mr. Sperry. And Roger Sperry, the scientist, had this habit of wearing bow ties that were really strange looking. And so she made up a BS story. She just made it up. And I remember exactly where I was in my house back in 1994 when I read that. I didn't have the videos back then. I just was reading this in a book. And I remember reading this story about Vicky and how she just made up this story about Roger Sperry's tie. And I'm thinking to myself, oh my goodness, this is exactly what my clients do. I'd already been working 5 years in the world of business professionals, and they were always making up stories, about things that were happening, making up interpretations. And I could see, that they were all often very inaccurate in some of these interpretations that they would come up with about themselves, or about the the motivations of other people. They would make up stories about that. And I thought to myself, oh my God, every one of us makes up stuff about things. And so this is a really important part of the left hemisphere function that is important to wrap your head around, because whenever you experience something like, I'm not good enough, I don't deserve, there's something wrong with me, I'm a failure, anytime you experience, whenever you find that you're beating yourself up, like you're calling yourself names, or you have these negative self-judgments about yourself, always, 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 that comes from your left hemisphere. Always. Those assessments, those self-judgments, those analyses, that comes from your left hemisphere. And for its part, I heard somebody use the word shame. For its part, your right hemisphere, if it hears that internal dialogue coming from your left hemisphere, you did that wrong, you're a loser, you never do it right, those kinds of self-judgments, the right hemisphere, for its part, believes the judgment of the left hemisphere and contributes this feeling of shame. So the left hemisphere handles the guilt, and the right hemisphere then throws in the shame for on top of things. And so you've got guilt and shame that happen almost simultaneously most of the time. And this is a collaboration, well, not intentional, but an unconscious collaboration between the left and right hemisphere. The left hemisphere judges, the right hemisphere contributes the shame that needs to go with that judgment. This is a really, really important thing to know about the left and right hemisphere, because you want to know who's responsible for what. These two hemispheres are two of your team members. They're the two dimensions of your consciousness that are physical. So I'm going to go through like a list of characteristics of each hemisphere that Gazzaniga and Sperry discovered during their 20, 30 years of research. That the left hemisphere is logical. It's calculating. And again, you're going to get all these slides to study and go over once again. It assesses and judges things. It's cautious and it's reserved. It is success-oriented. That's an important distinction to remember. Left hemisphere is always success-oriented. It's risk-averse, and it's mostly detached from feelings. It doesn't have the range of emotional expression that the right hemisphere has. So the right hemisphere is not logical. it's just intuitively aware, and it's very present oriented instead of future oriented. So when you think about food temptations, when you experience the food temptations, that is your right hemisphere saying, I want that now. And the hell with the future. I don't care about that. Your right hemisphere always wants pleasure in the moment and the avoidance of pain in the moment. And so it is curious, it's inquisitive, it's impulsive, it's expressive, it's pleasure oriented instead of success oriented. It takes chances, and it is very emotionally engaged. Whenever you hear somebody talking with using a lot of I pronouns, like I'm telling you, this was like a really great thing. I did this, and it was just fantastic. You know that both hemispheres are involved in that expression of speech. Both the left is contributing the words, the right is contributing all the color and the emotion. But the left hemisphere, on the other hand, number 7 there on the left-hand side, is often detached or tries to detach from feelings. And then you're going to hear them use the you pronoun a lot. And you ask them, well, tell me how did you succeed so well, at this task? Well, you just have to follow the numbers. There's a specific process that you do in order to accomplish this. And anytime you do that, you're always going to have that success. Well, they're always using this you and your. And you notice that when someone uses that second person pronoun a lot, you're also going to notice that it's almost in a monotone, that there's no contributing emotional content there. That means that the right hemisphere is being repressed by the left. When you hear all that, you think this way and you just follow the steps and you just do it. And when you do it that way, you're going to be successful. These are things to know about differences between your left and right hemisphere, because then when you're in the middle of like an inner conflict of any sort, you're going to know, okay, left hemisphere, you're doing that, and right hemisphere, you're doing that, and you have the opportunity to actually interact with them individually, because they are individual conscious systems. So here's another list of characteristics. Your right hemisphere, she's your wild child. She loves new, novel things. She loves, sensuous things. She is self-centered. She loves surprises and intrigue. She's impulsive and spontaneous. She's direct, very direct and authentic. Now, ironically, you might have a disagreement with this, but ironically, your right hemisphere makes most of your decisions for you. She loves to express, and she likes to be understood and embraced. The left-hand hemisphere, on the other hand, is practical and cautious. It likes the familiar. It's other-centered. It likes process and predictability. It plans and calculates. It's polite. It tries to not be direct. It'll like make up a story instead of saying, how many times have you had the experience where you are talking with someone, and let's say there's something that they're saying that you somewhat disagree with, but you don't think it's the time to actually overtly disagree with them. You're thinking to yourself, God, these people are nuts. They're crazy. I mean, I should tell them just bug off. That's your right hemisphere wants in the worst way to say that, but doesn't say that. And your left hemisphere just kind of nods. Okay, all right, puts up with it and tries to be just polite about it. And in that little dynamic that I just described, the left inhibits the right, keeps the right from sticking, so to speak, its foot in its mouth and causing trouble for you as a result of saying something a little too direct. And the left hemisphere believes it's in control. And it's a myth. Actually, the right makes most of the decisions. So this is important. These are the first 2 dimensions for you to know about in your 4-dimensional consciousness.